When was the last time you thought about Flanders? And I'm not talking about the Christo-fascist neighbor in The Simpsons. I'm talking about the Flemish, the part of Belgium that doesn't speak French or German. The Low Countries, okay, so the Low Countries, which are Netherlands, Belgium, maybe Luxembourg, what we would sometimes today refer to as the Benelux countries, are very important for art history, European art history, I should note. This is very much going to be a Eurocentric channel. When I talk about art, I can't help it. I am European, and to be fair, much of art history and the art world is quite Eurocentric. It's a problem that I'm not going to be able to solve. So we are going to be quite Eurocentric here. When I talk about art history, I'm talking about Europe for the most part. But the Low Countries, so think of, the Dutch-speaking part of Europe, have a long history with producing very fine painters. Some names you may be familiar with is Rembrandt, Vermeer, and Van Gogh, or as the Dutch pronounce it, Van Gogh. Very few people know this actually, but Dutch is a language derived from Klingon. A lot of. The artist that I want to talk about today is a Flemish painter, very important, bruegel. Bruegel is a 1500s painter, so during sort of high Renaissance, Northern Renaissance, which is different from the Southern Italian Renaissance. He is known for initially painting quite religious themed scenes, a lot of big spectacles. I'm going to show you immediately. I can show you, by the way, this book here. See, it's a lot thinner than the book last week about Hockney. This is published by, let's see here, Wahlström och Widstrand in Stockholm. But its original published is translation from a book by Keith Roberts. I don't know who that is, someone. But it's originally published Phaidon Press, London. This book is from 1975. So this comes from my grandfather. This is the typical sort of book you can find in secondhand stores. Someone's grandparent died, and all those ungrateful grandchildren immediately look at all these wonderful books in their libraries and they decide, I can't be bothered keeping any of these books, just give them off to secondhand. These days we have the internet. We don't need books on paper anymore. But there are some great prints in this one. I'm going to show you some of the earlier Bruegel that may get more sort of attention. They are more they sort of more, they grab you more. They are more novel, so to speak. This is called Dulle Griet. Translated according to Swedish in this book as Tokiga Greta, which would mean crazy Gretel. But here you can see it's very elaborate, very busy. This is not minimalism. You can see a lot of crazy stuff going on. You can see a lot of details. Look at this face here with a piercing. There's this guy here, which I'm not sure if you're going to see properly. Let's point. Look at there's two legs and a head holding a bowl and a spoon up the, I would say, mouth or asshole, depending on how you say it. It's sort of like, the famous illusionary picture of, is this a duck or an old woman? Is that, no, it's a duck or a hare. Is this a rabbit or a duck? And then there's another famous sort of illusionary pic of, is this a young maiden or an old woman? Anyway, that has nothing to do with bruegel. But you can see there's a lot of slight surreal imagery here. There's like an egg thing here with something sticking out. I think that's supposed to be like a harp, or it was called, yeah, an instrument of some sort. There's like a boat here with lots of things sticking out. A lot of you may see this and think of another Flemish artist called Hieronymus Bosch. And to you, I would say, you get a gold star, young student, because a lot of people regard Bruegel as a successor to Hieronymus Bosch. These sort of paintings tend to get a lot of eyes on them. A lot of people get fascinated by these things because they seem sort of proto-modern. They also get psychedelic and weird and strange in a way that we tend to think of only people living today are this way. That people in the past are so buttoned up. You know, they are more like, let's see here. As yes, you remember from Monday, I have a very thick neck. And I struggle with buttoning up. Oh, fuck. This is people from the past. I am proper. I am boring, and I don't like anything that makes me feel strange inside. I am a person of the past. That was a little bit of comedy bit I used there. But actually, people have always loved weird things and morbid things and macabre things. It's a typical thing that you have to remind people that people used to go to public executions. You know, people used to collect memorabilia from dead saints. And memorabilia, I mean body parts from dead saints. This is another image that is, kind of follows that morbid theme. It's called The Triumph of Death. You can see there's a lot of skeletons going around looting and pillaging. Some people in torture instruments in the back. Well, torture contraptions, I should say, in the back. I can show you, there's also a close-up image here of the same painting. See the skeleton riding on the skinny horse. Horse looking as skinny as a model from the early 2000s. I just took notice of this little dog here. Look at this poor little dog. Skinny dog. Oh. But a lot of these are, you know, fabulous in their own way. It's not my favorite Bruegel. I'm not going to pronounce the name the same at any point. I should show you this one though as well. This is a famous Bruegel, the Tower of Babel. If you don't know that story, it's basically that in the before times, when humans only spoke one language, united, a bunch of people decided we're gonna build a big fuck you tower and that just stretches up into the sky that reaches heaven. And God got mad at that because God is kind of petty and God is a NIMBY. So God struck down this tower and then cursed humanity to not be able to speak the same language, not understand each other anymore. Instead of having one unifying language, we now have plenty of language. Suddenly we have Danish and Korean and Yiddish and other languages, not just one perfect singular biblical language. And by the way, are there people who, you know, there's a lot of, you know, crazy radical fundamentalist Christians out there that believe that, you know, in Noah's Ark and so on, and they refuses to believe in evolution. Are there any Christians like that who refuses to believe in linguistics? Who, you know, when reading about Indo-European languages and about how, you know, English and German and French and Spanish is related to Russian, is related to Persian, is related to Hindu. Are there any like hardcore religious people who refuse to believe that because that contradicts the story of the Tower of Babel? If I was a religious freak, that would be my thing. I would be the flat earther for Tower of Babel. But in any case, a lot of those pictures of religious images that are obviously historically important, and a lot of painting, a lot of European painting has its origin in biblical images and in the church, because the way often you would make it as an artist is by painting for the church, or even if you were an aristocrat and you wanted to buy some art, you would typically buy something with a religious motif in order to prove how Christian you were. There wasn't a lot of room for other kinds of images, but that's something that makes Bruegel interesting, because what Bruegel eventually ends up starting to do is draw paintings like this. This is peasants with their cows, and this is, below that, peasants with some vegetables, including some cucumbers. And what else is that? Looks like tomatoes, but it can't be tomatoes. Actually, when did the tomato came to Europe? Because this is 1500 something, almost certainly 1565. So the tomato may have arrived, but people didn't like eating the tomato at first, because the tomato is in the nightshade family, so people thought tomatoes were poisonous. The same with potatoes, right? I don't know how exactly it goes. It took some time before convincing. Maybe tomatoes, people definitely didn't like potatoes at first, but maybe tomatoes, people kind of got accustomed to more earlier. In any case, that's irrelevant. Here's a close-up of some peasant women with their dresses, and look at that friendly face in the middle. So charming. You kind of feel like you want to get to know her. And there's a lot of images here. We're gonna see some images here. Let's see, of a peasant wedding. And when I say peasant, I don't mean pheasant. I'm not talking about a bird. I'm talking about poor people. Most of history has been filled with poor people. Very few people were rich. Very few people were nobles. Very few people were part of the aristocracy. It's a bit of a pet peeve of mine, actually, when too much of history fiction focuses on this, like, 1% of a medieval society or a later society, or when people do family research, looking at the genealogy, and they focus too heavily on this one family members of theirs that happen to have some sort of noble connection. And I always get annoyed by that, because most of our family, most of our ancestry, I think this is a human thing. This is for all of us. Most of our ancestry are going to be poor peasants who lived out in the middle of nowhere, just trying to make a living, harsh conditions, and we should honor those people. We should take care into remembering those people, and see ourselves as lucky to have such hardworking and hardy folks in our family history. So I hate posh people. I hate the aristocracy. I hate nobles. I'm much more interested in pictures like this of a wedding. A peasant wedding. Look at it, and it still has a lot of those details that you remember from earlier, those kind of Boschian details. But now it's less. It's not fantasy. It's not. It's more. It kind of approaches what we would think of as kitchen sink realism. No, not really. These are still kind of comic images. They are still romanticized images, but they have details of real people. Here you have a guy playing the bagpipes. The bagpipes used to be a very common instrument in Europe, all over Europe. It's not just a Scottish instrument. Almost every European culture has their own version of a bagpipe. You have people here carrying food. Someone taking a bowl here of food. You have the old people here in the back. This guy with a spoon in his hat. This little child here eating with a big oversized hat. You can't say that this isn't charming as hell. And here you get a scene of dancing, again with the bagpipe, again with the guy with the spoon in his hat, and again little children here, and you can sort of see them kicking up feet and dancing. My grandfather was a big fan of these images, and he tried to copy them, sketching and so on. So for that reason, it sort of has a bit of a special place for me as well. You can see here another detail of a guy with a spoon in his head. One of the reasons why I came to think of bruegel now is because I've been playing the game Pentiment from a few years ago, made by Obsidian Entertainment, and it's a game that's sort of perfectly made. I'm like the perfect target demographic for that game, because you play as a journeyman artist aspiring to become a master artist, making his masterpiece in Renaissance Bavaria around this era, while simultaneously confronting with the sort of new era, the new modern era that's slowly emerging of Martin Luther and the Reformation and the printing press and a lot of more political instability. And it's a role-playing game, but there's no action, there's no violence, there's no combat. You just go around talking to people, and there's sort of decision-making about how do you spend your days. And there's some mystery attached to it, but that's not really... The important thing is that you just get to sort of immerse yourself in the world, where he works in a scriptorium, one of the last scriptoriums in Europe, with the monks, just doing manuscripts. And it's a fabulous game. It's one of my favorite games of all time. And you noticed one of the characters in Pentiment wears a spoon on his hat. I can only imagine it's a sort of runabout reference to this. Here you get another peasant with his bagpipe. The bagpipe used to be quite an important instrument for Europeans of all kinds. I should actually show, I'm about to finish this because I think we have enough content here, but I want to show, speaking of instruments, there's another detail that I forgot to mention about the skeletons. We'll end on showing him because he is my favorite skeleton in all of this. I just have to take the time to go back. Look at this guy right here. No, that's that. Where is he? Wait, that is him. That is him. Look at him. He's playing the hurdy-gurdy. A skeleton playing the hurdy-gurdy. Isn't that the most fabulous thing you ever seen? That's so fun. The hurdy-gurdy is like the bagpipe, something that needs a comeback. Europeans used to love these instruments. Why don't we love them anymore? Goodbye. Boop.